Welcome to Uncommon Sense, where we do our best to make it common again. I'm your host, Adrian Ahlquist, and today I'm joined by David Cooney, who is a speaker / expert on localism, which the former name is distributism, which we've talked about other times on this podcast. I did an interview with my dad called A New Name for Distributism. That's a previous episode, and we've got a lot of feedback on it and stuff. So we're going to continue the conversation on this new name and just what distributism is in general. And so I'm very happy to have David here. David, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
Very good. Very good.
Good.
So before we start, I want to tell you about David's book, Distributism Basics, Foundational Principles. If you're interested to know more about it, there it is. There it is on the screen if you're watching it. And you can find it at the blog, what is it called?
It's the book patch.
The book patch, sorry. Yeah, the book patch.
Yeah.
And you can go to thebp.site/167644. That's the link, and I'll put it in the description. And it's for print only for $13 plus shipping, and then you can also buy the $10 ebook. So yeah, that would be a great place to go. We're going to talk about distributism, but we're not going to cover everything. So please go there. Also visit David's blog because he has a blog called Practical Distributism, and you can go to practicaldistributism.blogspot.com. So that would be a great place also to get a lot more material on this socioeconomic principle. But yeah, let's get into it. Oh, you've also written for Gilbert Magazine, and I encourage you to
a couple times.
Yeah. And I think you wrote for A New Name for Distributism, that issue where we talk about localism. So
and I also had an article in Hound of Distributism.
Okay, great. Oh, that's awesome.
I wrote one of the chapters there. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you can pick up that book, The Hound of Distributism, at our shop, chesterton.org/shop. And if you become a member, you can get the previous issues of Gilbert Magazine. And so that was a big one, a big issue, A New Name for Distributism. So yeah, let's get into it. Now a lot of people, it's hard to succinctly define distributism / localism. It's hard to define sometimes. I mean, it took Pope Leo a whole encyclical, and then Belloc and Chesterton developed on it. But it's interesting to hear different people's take on it. So how would you define it?
Well, the main issue, I'll start off with why I think it's hard.
Okay.
Is because it's such a wide scope thing. You can't just say, well, distributism is this one thing. It really is, in my view, a completely different philosophical view of looking at the structure of society and its economic system in order that it can be just for everybody. And that would be my basic description of it. In addition to that, one of the reasons why I like the introduction of the name localism is because distributism emphasizes localism both in the political and economic spheres. That under the principle of subsidiarity, we shouldn't have all of this political power centralized. It should be as local as it can practically be, depending on what issue is being addressed. And that actually makes it more democratic because the local people have more say in what's going on in their community and how to address the issues of their community. And then on the business side, it's, to me, the local economy is the foundation of a strong national economy. Mm-hmm. If our local economies across the nation were stable and secure and vibrant, then a lot of these issues that caused problems, like the whole 2008, recession, that would have been greatly mitigated because we wouldn't have this economy that is completely dependent upon the national scale or the international scale. The local communities could have continued functioning. And that's, to me, that would be kind of how I would describe it.
Okay, so let's say hypothetically I'm a staunch capitalist or staunch socialist, it doesn't matter, but I've never heard of distributism. How would you broach the topic to me? And I mean, you kind of did right now, but let's say, I mean, they don't know anything about it, and what would be the first thing you tell them?
Well, I guess now it really comes on to, from the socialist side, I would say the real way to empower the worker is to actually make them the owner as much as they practically can be of their work.
Yeah, right.
You know, and instead of selling their work to somebody else, they should be using their work for their own benefit, and that way they do get the fruits of their labor. And on the capitalist side, it becomes a bit more complex because capitalists actually accept a lot of the things that distributists and localists promote. The issue is the things that they accept that we don't. Things like usury, the idea that it's just a cutthroat market and anti-competitive practice is perfectly acceptable under capitalist ideas. You know, most capitalists would tell you everybody in business should act ethically, but there's nothing inherent in the system to actually really even encourage it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
And that's kind of the approach I would take. You know, a lot of capitalists lament the fact that their local shop shuts down, but to them it's just business.
Yeah, and I'm glad you. I'm glad you had a different thing to say to the typical socialist and the typical capitalist, because they do have different values. They do emphasize different things. But distributism / localism, by the way, I'm going to use them interchangeably. So if we say one, it means the other. So what I was going to say is localism has the benefits of both. I think it has the fruits of both ultimately. Now,
well, at the same time, not being a compromise between the two. It really is something completely different. It has the benefits of both, but it's not like saying, well, we'll take this much of capitalism and this much of socialism and we'll make it work together. That's not what it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Now I'm glad you brought up the 2008 stock market crash, because what happened recently, a couple of weeks ago at this point when this is airing, was the Reddit GameStop debacle, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to refer to it as a specific thing, but if you don't know about it, well, do you want to explain what happens, or I can? It doesn't matter.
Well, my understanding of it is this. What had been going on for some time is that hedge fund investment groups had been short selling certain businesses centered around GameStop, and there were a couple of others as well.
Which means they were betting that
the businesses would fail. Betting that the businesses would fail, the stock value would go down, and they would make a profit from the fact that the stock values went down.
Right.
They borrow the stock at its current value. They sell it so they get that money. But when they borrow the stock, they're not borrowing an amount of money, they're just borrowing the stock.
Right.
So when they have to return the stock, they buy it back at whatever the current price is.
So they're hoping.
So if they bought it at $10 and now it's $1, they made $9 each share. However, if the stock price goes up, then they lose money. And what happened on this Reddit page is, I think that the lockdowns actually contributed a lot to this, because you had a lot of people sitting at home with nothing else to do. And a certain group of them started looking at these things and said, oh, look, here's this company that's being short sailed. I know how we can make a lot of money off of it. And they actually use the tricks of the stock market against the insiders. Because the one thing that I believe happens, and a lot of people say this, is, a hedge fund does a short, and then they have their experts that go out on media and start, talking bad about this company. Oh, GameStop, it's a dinosaur. It's going the way of, Blockbuster. It's going to fail. You should sell, which of course drives the stock price down. And these groups, just the interesting thing about the Reddit group is that this isn't a fund. This is just a group of people who are all acting individually, but coordinated. And they're saying, you know what? If we drive this stock up, not only will we make money, but we'll stick it to these rich people who are constantly manipulating our whole economy and getting rich off of it.
Right, because what the fact was that these hedge funds were shorting it a lot. They weren't. It wasn't just a small short. It was shorting it 100%.
And they were shorting it over and over again.
Yes. Yeah. Right. So at a certain point, the fact that they were shorting it so heavily was actually contributing to people's value of the company, which was interesting. So
they were actually helping the price go up.
Yeah, which is
on their bet that it's going to go down, because in their mind, and they may be correct, this company may be destined to go down. But in the meantime, you've got all these people who have individually gone and driven the stock price up, and the reaction of the market, and even the company that makes the app they use, was to try and shut them down and portray them as, insurgents. They're trying to equate them as the same people who rioted in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., that these people don't understand true market economics, when all they're doing is using the rules that the economic experts have set up.
Right.
And they're holding firm. So supposedly, they're like, don't sell. That's their thing. We've driven the price up. Don't sell yet. Yeah. Because at this point, they're like, okay, now the market's reacted. They've realized we're turning their game against them, and they're trying to punish us. So just hold out, and we'll make it hurt as much as possible.
Yeah. And it's interesting that, because I've heard self-proclaimed capitalist speakers and stuff like that. They've said that, they basically said the Redditors shouldn't have done that. They said that this is bad for the economy. I've heard them say that, which is really interesting given their worldview, because they didn't do anything illegal as far as we know. They just got together, and they knew that what it was valued. They didn't spread any disinformation. They just said, hey, let's make this stock go up. And then I'm actually working on an article that says, look, they clearly don't believe in the free market. Exactly. Yeah.
These people saw an investment opportunity and pursued it according to all the existing rules. Yeah. And they're winning.
Right.
They're trying to shut them down because the other side is trying to shut them down because they're losing. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, this is what you guys say you love, the free market.
Because they call it fair trade. So but now they're saying it's bad for the economy. Well, is there something unfair about it being bad for the economy? If not, then you have nothing to complain about. But if there is, then there's a contradiction. So
and how is it good for the economy to take a company like GameStop, with its investment in local, you can say they have investment in local community. They have their buildings there. They employ people, and to help drive it under the ground, which is exactly what these hedge fund people were doing. Exactly. They were deliberately trying to drive the business into the ground. They were publicly saying, "Oh, this is a bad company. Don't invest in it. It's going to go away." That's hurting the economic factor of that company. Yeah, and they'll defend themselves saying, "Look, we're just saying our opinion." Well, guess what? That's all those Redditors were saying.
Right.
They're saying we can make money by doing this. That's just their opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And the same capitalists were saying that it was bad for the economy because people are going to get hurt. That's another phrase that they threw around. People are going to get hurt. Like people weren't getting hurt before. I mean, the people were getting hurt because certain people were losing a lot of money. But now all of a sudden it was the rich people getting.
Yeah. But see, here's the other thing though, is that in terms of the Reddit group, the only thing that's going to hurt for them, and I'm not inside this group, so I don't know, but my understanding is that within this group, they're really just investing disposable income. Okay. They got their last stimulus check and it's been sitting around. Yeah. They're not necessarily investing their life savings. What's hurting is these hedge fund investors who are usually very rich people, and it's getting rid of their disposable income that they had hoped to make a lot of money on. So, it's one side's going to get hurt in no matter what, but that's the nature of the stock market. It is a giant gambling casino that if you took Las Vegas and Atlantic City and Monte Carlo and combined them, it puts them all to shame. Mm-hmm. It is just a giant gambling casino. And guess what? Sometimes the house loses.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's tie this back to what we were talking about, because we don't have a localist economy really. I mean,
No.
no. So what could have been prevented? Because I tend to side with the Redditors on this one, but there was a problem that there was an injustice to be addressed, right? Because
yes,
they had figured out that there is some injustice. So let's picture a localist society. How would the injustice be, avoided in the first place? That's kind of what I want to ask.
well, so okay, now we're drifting off into just my opinion. This is not necessarily a
Sure.
I'm not dictating what is the localist / distributist view on this. This is my personal opinion, based on my own studies and my views of these things. Is that if under a truly localist society, we were to have an investment system like the stock market, it would be precisely that. It would be an investment. You wouldn't be buying shares of ownership that you just decide to randomly sell based on fluctuation in value. What you would be doing is you would be, it's like, so if you were having a company and you wanted an influx of cash so that you could, you had your business plan, you wanted to do some expansion, you wanted to buy some new equipment or whatever else, you would sell investment shares. And what the people would get in return for those shares while they owned them would be a percentage of your profit.
Mm.
And so there's true risk of profit and loss there, because if your plan goes awry, the profit doesn't come. But sorry
to interrupt, but
yeah.
So we have companies that do give dividends. Not every company does, but you would essentially envision that all companies would have a dividend associated with its stock.
Well, yeah, because that's the whole point of the investing, and this type of investing would not be incompatible under a localist / distributist idea, because you're not collecting the dividend on the money you've loaned them. You're getting a percentage of the profit. This is what you're doing is by investing in the company, you're buying a percentage of profit for the duration of that loan. And then this would also be in typical terms a temporary loan. So you would buy a 5-year investment, and at the end of 5 years, the company would pay you back your original investment, dollar for dollar, and your profit or loss would be based on the percentage of interest that you got or didn't get during that investment period. That's how I see it being different. It's more of a personal interaction. It's not just this money, these numbers floating around. It's, I'm actually looking at your business, and I think you've got a good idea, and it becomes more like a crowdfunding type thing. Than what we typically think of as the stock market. And that's how I see it.
Okay. Yeah. No, I like that. I'm sure people will disagree, and that's fine, right? Because it's not a proven model yet, right?
No.
Yeah.
No. And that's why I said this is just my view.
No. Actually, speaking of your view, what do you think of the new name localism? And now I know I want to preface this with I understand that your brand is definitely centered around the name distributism. It's kind of hard to change that when your blog is called Practical Distributism. So that's understandable. But as a caveat, what do you think of localism?
Well, as I said in the article, I like it. I like localism for a couple of reasons. First of all, particularly if you're talking to anybody on the conservative or political right, on the capitalist side, distributism has the problem it's always had. When that side hears it, they think redistribution by the government, wealth stealing, and it shuts them off. Whereas localism is an idea that a lot of them would say, okay, well, I like the idea of local business. And on the political left and the socialist side, actually, I find a lot of them are actually the biggest supporters of localism already. The problem I have I see, I don't say I have, but this is the problem I see with the term localism, is that it's already widely used and it has many different meanings. And those meanings are different than what we really mean, because we really mean a complete localism.
Okay.
And, for the political left, localism doesn't mean much more than supporting your local farmers at the farmers market,
Sure.
and maybe going to your local coffee roaster shop and supporting them. But when it comes to government, political left isn't really localism in terms of government usually.
Yeah, and that's why I probably what may happen. We were thinking about this, that it might turn into something like Chestertonian localism or whatever. And then you have a qualifier. Because you said, localism has other other ideas come to mind.
And that's Chestertonian localism or complete localism.
Sure.
And on the right, as I said before, they already like the idea of the local shop and everything, but you know what? To them, a franchise that's completely controlled by a corporate interest somewhere else would still be local business, because somebody local bought it, even though they have to follow all the rules set by, they can't even determine their pay in some of these franchise agreements. They can't be local customers.
Yeah. You know what? I wanted to say something on that, because we got a criticism of the name because of the philosophy that big businesses sometimes use, which is think globally, act locally.
Yeah.
But I wanted to push back against that, because I actually think that's an okay philosophy, because we can think globally. We want to renew the world. That's our motto for the society, is we want to renew the world through Christian joy and common sense. Yeah. Well, the way you do that is by acting locally. We've got to accept that our small decisions, our local acts, will have a global impact. It has it's a ripple effect.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think the big problem actually that a lot of businesses do is they act globally, and then it has negative local impacts, just like how you're talking about right now.
Exactly. And the other issue I have with the right is that they may think they're for local government, but most of the rhetoric I've heard doesn't really go much more local than the state. Especially here in the United States. Right. We don't want the federal government to interfere with states' rights and this other stuff. But you know what? When it comes to states interfering with local stuff, they're not really that consistent. Whereas in the distributist view, under subsidiarity, we definitely say, well, the state shouldn't be interfering in local matters that they can handle on their own. And guess what? They can handle a lot more local matters than they think. It's just that our political structure doesn't allow it. It's, the fact that my property tax goes to the state first, and then the state decides how much of it comes back to my community. That's ridiculous. And it even goes for things like school bonds. The state can actually, the local community can pass a bond for a certain amount, and then they not get it all because the state decided against it. That's
interesting.
We need to fix that type of issue within our society as well.
Sure. And localism is often talked about it being a grassroots, ground up kind of thing. And I remember Joe Grabowski, who we had some pushback on this as well, but he was saying it's not necessarily a ground up thing. It's it could be just instead of it could be not top down. That's the other thing, is I wouldn't say top down either, but it might require people on the top to start relinquishing power, and that I wouldn't say that's necessarily top down. That's kind of that's top. Going away. But that's not going to happen until the people stand up. It's not going to happen until the people elect local officials, and then collectively the local officials and the people start complaining to the county and the state, saying, "Look, we can deal with this. Get out of our way." Okay.
That's why I think it still does remain kind of a bottom-up thing.
Sure, that makes sense.
To that degree, because but it also, it's got to be a wide movement. You're not going to have it if my little dinky town here in Western Washington starts to do that, and we're the only one. It's not going to happen. It's got to be a philosophical shift in the society as a whole.
And honestly, I think that's one of the virtues of the internet, because that now we have the potential for it being a wide movement. Because I mean, we saw evidence of that with Reddit. It was these individuals who found a local place, not necessarily spatially, but on the internet, on the subreddit, and they were able to make an impact and kind of show the cracks in our system. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing where an institution, an infrastructure like the internet is beneficial and would even continue to work under a distributed system, because you have things like people with certain interest groups, entertainment, things which can have a niche audience, which isn't necessarily something in the local community. But you can have that online community, which isn't local, but it can have an impact on the local communities in a wider area. And you had this, like in the Middle Ages, when you had, the journeyman who could go from town to town and they would share information, and you had acting groups, right? They went from town to town. Well, now you can actually have your entertainment online and support it directly, rather than them having to travel to you and collect money at a door, which is still a good thing. I'm not saying that should end, but I'm saying that this is another enabling thing that could still fit in with a broader localist idea.
Right. And obviously the virtual communities is definitely a derivative of what we're talking about. It's not local in the flesh, right? And ultimately we are flesh and blood. That's why it matters. Jesus became
the physical can't be disregarded. It's got to be brought in part of it.
Exactly. And but I think sometimes, if you have, it's better than nothing. It's you at least get a derivative as opposed to nothing. But that's what I wanted to stipulate or to clarify. This is great. Did you want to mention anything else about distributism, about how to get people to latch on and just promote the idea more, or about your blog, anything?
Well, what I do, the reason why I picked the name Practical Distributism was because, I had actually, for about 6 months before I started it in 2009, I had just been introduced to the idea of distributism. But it was in much of the older writings, Chesterton and Belloc themselves, McNabb and Pesch with his Solidarist movement. And, they were writing for their time. And a lot of the things they were writing about were really practical for their time. You can talk about, the return to the land movement. Those were the days when industrial farming was just beginning. And it really wasn't an impractical thing to say to a bunch of people, hey, return to the land. That's not so much the case today. Our cities have built up so much more, everything else. You can't turn to a place like New York or Seattle or Los Angeles and say, hey, just start growing your own food. Because they live in a high rise, and they can grow a little bit, but it's not really a practical solution for them. And that's why my idea was to present the ideas as the concepts and say, what, these concepts can be applied today in a way that's appropriate to today. And so that's kind of where I took, even though I kind of, one of the things that I actually started my blog as a joke.
Oh, wow. I was going to ask you what made you start a blog on distributism, and that's
funny. So there's two phases to this story. First of all, growing up, I liked mysteries and detective stories, but I hadn't actually encountered Chesterton's Father Brown until the early 2000s. And I read through those and I really liked them. I like the way that he wrote it. I like how he had a Catholic priest who was a very good character and a very believable and reasonable character, which, in modern days, you don't get that. And so that led me to want to read more of Chesterton. And I read The Everlasting Man and Orthodoxy, and I was really impressed and really touched by those writings. And so I dug even more into him. And then I found his Distributist writings, which led me to Belloc and McNabb and Pesch and other writers. So that's the first phase, my discovering distributism and actually starting to imbibe these ideas. In the meantime, my wife decided to throw, for our 20th anniversary, a surprise marriage vow renewal party. That's right. And she pulled it off. And she managed to track down several friends from high school that I hadn't seen in many, many years. And I struck up an email conversation with one of them where we were discussing, the changes in our lives and how our views had changed and the different impacts. And I was sharing things about distributism with him. And he quipped one day in an email to me, "You should start a blog." So I did. Wow. And I sent him a message and said, "Now look what you've done." And then I had it there. So if we had an issue of distributism in our email thing, I would actually write an article and post it and send in the link. I said, here's my answer. And that's how I got started.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you did that. I'm glad that
yeah. So to my friend Tim Snodgrass, thank you. I wouldn't be having this conversation if it weren't for what you said.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, I mean, yeah, thank you for all you've done and done to promote distributism / localism.
Yes.
And thank you for coming on the show. Again, if you want to learn more about the basics, I would get David's book, Distributism Basics, Foundational Principles. And again, you can go to thebp.site/167644, or you can go to the book patch and search for his book. And definitely visit David's blog, practicaldistributism.blogspot.com.
Thank you.
Yeah, consider joining us at the Society, becoming a member at chesterton.org/membership, where you can, again, read back issues of Gilbert, and you can read about localism and all the stuff we have to say about the socioeconomic principle. You can get the Hound of Distributism for a discount if you're a member. There's a lot of great stuff happening. But yes, thank you for listening. And until next time, help us to make uncommon sense common again.